Hello, lovely viewers. Welcome once again to yet another episode on Official Kingsbridge TV. With you in the house is your girl, Ewekwa Ofosuhima. Now, a long time ago, the white man came to the land of Africa in terms of trade, and during this trade, slave trade became something that became very rampant amongst them. Now, during the slave trade, they eluded a lot of items from a lot of countries, and some of these countries were Ghana. Now we have discovered that some of the items they eluded have been found in the British Kingdom. So the Kingdom of Ashanti, or the people of Ashanti in the Ashanti Kingdom, decided to go on a negotiation basis to get the return of all those items that have been eluded. Now, our Royal Majesty, His Highness Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II, was the one who was the forefronter, or the frontier, who was the one who was able to negotiate for these items to be returned. But the British Kingdom is telling us that they are going to release the items on loan. What do we have to say? There's nothing we can say because they are valuables that belong to us. And since we really appreciate our valuables, we are going to go with their terms and conditions. But I want all of us to analyze this thing very carefully. Let's assume you are in your house and an armed robber just comes to your house. Or forgive my language for using an armed robber. Maybe someone comes to your house, takes something without your permission, sends it to his or his house. Then you later discover that this thing was from my house and is with my friend. Then you go to your friend and tell him that, okay, you took this thing from me, just give it back to me and let me return. And your friend tells you that I'm going to give it to you on a loan. What do you make of it? It doesn't really, for me, it doesn't really augur well. But that is what is happening. So Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II, His Royal Majesty, has agreed to this negotiation. This negotiation couldn't have been done with the Ghana government, no, because it involves two kingdoms, and so we have agreed to accept the items on loan. Now, for more details, for more understanding, for more enquiries, go nowhere, stay glued to your seat. As I always say, if you like what you're watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that anytime we upload a new video, you'll be the first.
Now, it's been more than a century since treasures were looted by British soldiers from Ghana. Many of them hold huge cultural and spiritual significance. Now, in a landmark agreement, the Victoria and Albert and British Museums in London are returning them on loan to the Ashanti King. Our culture editor Katie Razzle has this exclusive report.
There is anger. People look at it in colonial terms. Looting of items, precious items belonging to people, items that they don't easily forget.
Gold from the royal court of the Ashanti Kingdom, which was once one of Africa's most powerful states. These objects and many more were looted by British troops in the Ashanti capital Kumasi in 1874 during the Third Anglo-Ashanti War. Sold at auction then, now they're going back to Ghana for the first time in 150 years, to Kumasi's Mencha Palace Museum in a landmark loan deal with the Victoria and Albert and the British Museum.
They enter the South Kensington Museum and they're put on display, and they're displayed both as a work of incredible West African goldsmithery, but also as a sort of, sign of British imperial and colonial power.
17 V&A items are returning, including a peace pipe used by Ashanti kings, the Asantehene, and heavy cast gold badges worn by courtiers tasked with cleansing the king's soul. The agreement is not with the Ghanaian government, but with Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II, the current Asantehene, who once worked for Brent Council, monarch for a people whose history is steeped in gold and wealth. The deal's chief negotiator is Ivor Ajimandia.
There's so much interest in these items. These were objects that were created by the royal artisans for all sorts of ceremonial reasons.
Is the fact that you're taking them on loan a problem?
It's not really a problem. At least these objects will be home.
The British Museum is also loaning 15 gold items, including a sword of state looted by British troops during the Anglo-Ashanti War of 1895-6. British law bans some national institutions, including the British Museum and the V&A, from permanently returning objects.
In giving a piece back, you're also giving back a missing piece of history.
Nana Ofriata Ayim is a special advisor to Ghana's culture minister. She welcomes the loan deals with the Ashanti King. The Ghanaian government could not have agreed to the terms.
The metaphor is, someone comes into your home and steals something from your house. keeps it in their house, and then, you know, X amount of years later comes and says, I'm going to lend you your thing back. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so in that way, I think it's going to be deeply problematic for a lot of people. But because I've been working, you know, with it, I know the kind of politics that surrounds it and also the kind of attachment to the idea of empire.
Those objects with origins in war, in looting, in military campaigns, we have a responsibility to the country's origins to think about how we can share those more fairly today. And it doesn't seem to me that all of our museums will fall down if we build up these kind of partnerships and exchanges.
Have you felt ashamed that these items are here?
I don't feel ashamed they're here. I feel they're part of a history of British Ghanaian interactions, some of which is around war, some of which is around slavery, some of which is an incredible creative Ghanaian diaspora in the UK today.
The V&A insists this is not restitution by the back door. A loan is not a model the Nigerians would accept for the return of the Benin bronzes, nor the Greeks over the Parthenon sculptures. But with British law as it stands, for the Asantehene, this deal is the best way to...
Nana Oforiatta-Ayim is a special advisor to Ghana's Minister of Culture. You saw her in that report there. Well, I also spoke to her and asked her about the significance of the return of these artefacts.
It's a first step, I'd say. You know, the law here in the UK prohibits items from going back permanently, but as we know, the law has been changed before for the Holocaust items, and so I think it's a step in the right direction. Obviously, a lot of people are not going to be happy with the idea of a loan going back to a country that really should have ownership of its own items, but it's a first step.
This wasn't an agreement with the country, was it, with the government? This is with the Ashanti King. Just explain why and what's the significance of that?
I think a proposal was made to the Ghanaian government, but it was a little bit problematic because the country can't really accept a loan back, or can't be seen to accept a loan back. Whereas with the kingdom, I think it was a simpler process. The agreement came from, one agreement came from the V&A, went to the Attorney General's office, and it was rejected, because there were so many stipulations on how the items should be received back, for example. Whereas I think, you know, Ghana has enough sovereignty to know how to look after its own items.
And these are Asante treasures, aren't they? Tell us a bit more about them.
So there's various items. There's a soul disc, for example, which the Asantehene would have worn as a protector of his soul. There's various headpieces. There's a gold pipe, and a lot of these items are imbued with spiritual significance. And so they're not just, you know, as Western museums might describe them, objects, but they are sometimes even, you might call them subjects, because they are imbued with immanence, with spiritual significance.
Is there a negotiation that could be reached here, a compromise, do you think, whereby the government would accept anything other than the full return of these items?
I mean, I know that in the language of, for example, the V&A, they were calling a renewable cultural partnership. I think, like I said, I think this is a first step, and I think what would have to happen is some kind of agreement or that goes from government to government. For now, it's the museums that have decided to return the items without the involvement of the UK government. So I think once the UK government gets involved, there's definitely a way forward.
What do these items mean? How important is it that they are returned, even if not permanently?
I mean, I think for me, the whole discourse is almost much bigger than just about the return of the objects. You know, we all know the aftermath and the resonance of colonial trauma, and I think, you know, lots of things were taken, you know, relatives, people, items, but also the idea of our own cultural sovereignty, our cultural value. And so I think, you know, it's almost like a metaphor of this bigger fragmentation, this bigger separation of self, these items coming back. And so it's like I keep saying, a first step towards healing and reparation, I think, on both sides.
Museum. It's a grand institution, also a shining symbol of wide-ranging thefts. In fact, it is the world's biggest receiver of stolen property. But its motto seems to be, first you loot, then you lose. We say this because the world's greatest thief is now being looted. Let me explain how. From the 16th to the 20th century, the British went on a colonization spree. They ravaged nation after nation and stole their culture. They looted close to 8 million artifacts. The list included India's Kohinoor diamond. All of this is displayed at the British Museum. They've been urged to return what they stole. Of course they haven't, and they don't plan to. Instead, they ticket the world proudly to let them view the loot. They make money off it. The British Museum has locked up the legacy of other lands, and poorly so. Recently, a staff member was accused of stealing from it. The lost items included gold jewelry and gems dating from the 15th to the 19th century. Now, the suspected worker has been fired. An investigation is underway, but this is not a unique instance. In 2004, 15 pieces of Chinese jewelry were stolen from the museum. In 2002, a 2,500-year-old Greek marble head was taken. Also, this is not unique to the British Museum. Artifact thefts are very common, apparently. Last year, thieves stole 500 ancient gold coins from a German museum. In 2019, jewels worth $108 million were stolen from another German museum. Despite security, museums suffer robberies. Experts say this happens nearly every day across the world. According to the latest Art Loss Register, 700,000 antiques and collectibles are currently lost or stolen, 7 lakh pieces. But here's what's shocking. Such thefts happening in institutions as large as the British Museum, they hold monumental objects. They chronicle entire civilizations and help us understand them. Like the Rosetta Stone, it enabled researchers to understand ancient Egypt. It was part of the British loot. It now sits inside a glass case. Artifacts like these are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, so the museum cannot afford to be caught off guard because we know what comes next. Most of the stolen items are sold in the black market or even melted down. In 2005, it happened to a Henry Moore sculpture. It was worth about $4 million, but it was melted down and sold for less than $2,000. It's criminal. But that's not even the worst part. These museums hold the world's history hostage. They contain what is not theirs, and they fail to protect it. Countries like Greece, India, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Ghana say these artifacts are theirs. They should be returned, and they're right. But do you know the museum's response? They say these countries lack the infrastructure to protect such expensive historic items. By the looks of it, the British Museum is not doing a great job either. In fact, it reeks of entitlement. It has withheld stolen spoils and makes up excuses to keep them. But wait till you hear the second excuse. The museum refuses to agree that most of its keep is stolen. The argument is, stealing is not really stealing if you're taking something that's lying around. Finders keepers. Such interesting logic. Do they also eat other people's lunch left unguarded in the office fridge? Their defense holds no water. The crimes committed by British colonizers are undeniable. They stole from the whole world, and now a large part of that cultural heritage lies unprotected in their museum. It's unacceptable. For decades, England has gotten away with it and raked in tourism revenue. The museum's trustees are comfortable and in no mood to return what's not theirs. But what about their government? Experts say most disputed artifacts will have to be returned if the government really chooses to. The US, Germany, Belgium, France, they're all doing it. They're returning the loot.
And sculptures. Here are the ones in the British Museum. There they are in their home in Athens. So at the moment, they're not together. Now, where do you think they look better?
I think the answer is very clear. They do look better in the Acropolis Museum, a state-of-the-art museum that was built for that purpose. And again, this is not a question of returning artifacts whose ownership we question. We feel that these sculptures belong to Greece and that they were essentially stolen. But if I told you that you would cut the Mona Lisa in half, and you would have half of it at the Louvre and half of it at the British Museum, do you think your viewers would appreciate the beauty of the painting? I'm a patient man, and we've waited for hundreds of years. I will persist.
In the UK, Queen Elizabeth was checking out real gold at the Bank of England. Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh saw 63,000 gold bars during a tour of a vault at the bank. The bars were stacked in 8 rows. Each 4-ton stack is 4 shelves high, and each bar weighs 29 pounds. The vault is one of 9 in which the bank stores $323 billion worth of gold. Now, not all the gold, though, belongs to Her Majesty's government. The Bank of England only owes 310 tons. That's just about $16.8 billion.
I think your stats said if you were going to do an Italian job on this place, you'd need 4,000 minutes.
That's right. Yeah.
It's incredible to look at, but it doesn't do anything. Why is it so valuable?
Partly because it's rare, so it's in limited supply. You can't keep making it. The gold here is a store of value. It is globally recognized. People want gold, so it creates a market in itself. It doesn't change value as much, for example, as currencies. This is a